As Canada gears up for its review of its key North American trade deal, U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer says trade talks with Canada are lagging behind those with Mexico.
This week we are having our first formal negotiations with Mexico on the USMCA, and we are doing it just as the President said. We're having talks separately with Canada, but we've moved along with Mexico. Canada is behind on this. With Mexico, we're already at the stage of some formal talks.
2 weeks ago, Canada-U.S. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc met with Greer in Washington. That meeting was seen as a good sign. It was the first since U.S. President Donald Trump froze trade talks over Ontario's Ronald Reagan ad. But since that meeting, there has been no announcement of formal talks between Canada and the U.S. And here at home, some say they are getting worried about the future of that deal.
I have a lot of concern with respect to the CUSMA deal and where we are going to find our way on that in the next while. And it needs to really be all of our talents and all of our efforts, whether that be provincially supporting the federal government in that negotiation or engaging ourselves directly with the U.S. administration.
Let's bring back the power panel. Andrew Thompson, Peter MacKay, Rob Benzie, and Michelle Cadario. Michelle, what do you make of these comments? Him saying essentially Canada is lagging behind Mexico. Is that sort of talk concerning to you?
Well, it's curious, I'll say. I think that if anybody wanted to speed up the talks, Ambassador Greer could step them up and kind of get them going. I don't in any way believe that it's Canada who's not ready to engage. And, Minister LeBlanc was down there last week and having conversations. I think that that's probably more of a strategic move on the ambassador's part in terms of positioning and maybe trying to get some concessions out of Canada to say that we're, if you don't come along and give up on something, I don't know what that is, then we'll leave you behind. It seems to be the playbook that they used last time as well.
Yep.
Not to say that anything is an empty threat, because you never do know with President Trump. The president has a lot of balls in the air right now, and let's be frank. It's very important. It's hyper important that we get a CUSMA deal. But it is all going to depend on what side of the bed that President Trump wakes up on the day that he's supposed to sign it, who he's decided to go to war with, and let's be honest. He was talking about more tariffs on allies who wouldn't want to participate and send ships to the war he started over there, and all those are countries that presumably have some kind of a trade deal, a brand new spanking new trade deal. So. Nothing's really worth the paper that is written on. So anyway, again, I believe that the government is taking part, they're at the table as much as the table has been open for them to sit at, and something will come. I am confident.
Peter?
I do find it concerning in some of the language about there being no formal talks as compared to Mexico. And this may be, as Michelle alluded to, just more sort of leverage that the trade representative is trying to utilize. I think it does speak to the point that Premier Moe made in that clip, that it is time for an all-hands-on-deck approach. So, of course, we have Dominic LeBlanc, we have a new trade representative in Janice Charette, and our new ambassador Wiseman. So there are new forces at play here. But taking the broader approach, I think, is what will be helpful. I also think that there is some leverage, JP, in the geopolitics, and that is, the war in Iran, closing the Straits of Hormuz, a stable supplier like Canada on things like energy, but also on aluminum and steel and softwood, products that, while the president may say for a certain audience that the Americans don't need, they do need. They absolutely need. And Pierre Poilievre made that point too in the podcast that we were discussing, that there are a lot of products that are going to help make America great again in tumultuous times. And so the geopolitics as the backdrop, I think, has sharpened the focus on having a stable supply and, more importantly, a strong historic partner like Canada. I do also worry about this potential split that, I think we've seen this game before as well, trying to parse off, this being a bilateral with Mexico and Canada and moving away from the trilateral discussion. I do worry about that as we get closer to the formal sit down in July, which is mandatory, by the way. We should never forget this is not something that the president sort of provoked unilaterally. There is a 6-year mandatory review. And we're moving, quite quickly now towards the time when everybody is going to have to be at the table. And that's when, the proverbial table stakes that the Prime Minister referred to, we're either at the table or on the menu. Canada's never going to be on the menu. We're full partners in this, and we have a lot of other issues that we will want to put forward in this discussion as well. And I'm sure that Team Canada will do that.
Just for the viewers at home, I want to let you know we have that box up on your screen. We will take you live to New York City shortly when Pierre Poilievre takes the stage to discuss Canada-U.S. relations at this keynote address, so just be prepared for that one. Andrew, I do feel like we have a bit of deja vu, or at least I do, because this is kind of what happened the last time with the NAFTA renegotiation, right? Because the U.S. did it with Mexico first. They sat down, they had meeting after meeting, and we were like, where's Canada? Why aren't we involved? Are we being left out? That was their strategy, right? Hash it out with Mexico, and then we were kind of brought in at the last moment. We made some requests, some were accepted, some weren't. We got the final text. Do you think that's what's happening here? Maybe the U.S. just feels like it's easier to deal with Mexico than it is to bring us in.
Well, yes, to a certain extent, I think that is true. I mean, the other piece is that really in many cases, the deal that is currently in place is probably about as good as it gets for either side. I don't know that there's a lot more for either the Americans or ourselves to give up on this, as much as we may want to negotiate more. Mexico is a much more fluid environment, and there are many, many more issues that need to be resolved in terms of those relationships with Mexico, including around security, although that's not directly a trade issue, but it's certainly a significant one. Labor mobility issues, there's all sorts of issues around the general security of the Mexican country. The China relationship is much more complicated than it is with us. So there's a number of issues that need to get sorted out with Mexico that maybe are not quite as high a priority here. That doesn't mean that we don't want to solve the forestry industry, we don't want to solve the aluminum or steel issues that are sitting there, but it certainly is a different kind of set of issues that that we are looking at, a different starting point, I guess that I would say, than where Mexico is. And I think we see that even when we look at what happened, what was it, last week, with the Americans announcing they were going to have another go at the tariff thing around this Section 301 review that they were looking at. Yep. Again, Canada was really an afterthought added into it. It was kind of like, oh yeah, I guess we should put them on notice too. But it was 10 days after they had already kind of signaled to everybody else they were doing it. So all of that, I think, goes back to say, I don't think we need to panic about the fact that we are supposedly lagging behind. It is obviously a strategy the Americans have to kind of put that message out there. But really, in terms of the starting point, we've already got a pretty good deal with the Americans. We've already hashed out a lot of these issues over previous agreements. And a lot of the hard work that needs to be done indeed needs to happen between the Americans and the Mexicans.
Rob, are you worried about the Mexicans getting ahead of us?
No, I'm not at all, JP, because, well, first of all, I understand why the Americans are dealing with Mexico first. 50% of the fresh fruits and vegetables sold in U.S. grocery stores come from Mexico. Mm-hmm. And sticker shock is a huge problem for American consumers. It's one reason why President Trump's polling numbers are underwater. I was in Ann Arbor, Michigan the other day, $5 for a gallon of premium gasoline. And in the United States, gas prices and grocery prices are things that everyone talks about. So I get what they're doing. I actually, JP, agree with what our friend David Frum has said repeatedly. Time is on Canada's side. The longer we wait, the weaker Mr. Trump gets. The polls are not kind to him. As Michelle was saying earlier, he's got many balls in the air with the war in Iran that is not going particularly well. It's not going to end anytime soon, apparently. That's going to affect prices of gasoline and things like that. It's also going to affect morale at home, frankly. And I think it's going to be a very, very difficult election, midterm elections in November for Mr. Trump's Republican Party. And once the new Congress is in place, Canada's going to be dealing with someone different. I know this review starts this summer, but it doesn't mean we have to sign something in August. I think time is on Canada's side.
Yeah, Michelle, I mean, he could get a deal before the midterms too and maybe dress that up as a win, like that's what he did with NAFTA, right? Because there was so little change to the actual text last time, right?
Yeah.
And yet he sold it as, it's a huge overhaul, it's the best deal ever. I mean, he could do that too this time, right? Like, hey, I sat down with Mexico and Canada, and I squeezed them, I extracted the most I possibly could. That could be a feather in his cap heading into what could be a difficult political season too.
Yeah, it could be, and as Rob said, he's probably going to be looking for wins. I'm not quite as optimistic about the midterms and the outcome. I want to believe, but I'm not convinced yet that it will swing both houses. But you know, if he actually does turn his attention to trying to revive that, to actually addressing affordability issues, that is very much in Canada's favor, especially because, you know, as Andrew mentioned, steel, lumber, and aluminum, it's driving up prices in the United States. Yeah. And you know, I think the finger is pointing ever more closely at him, and I think Americans, the longer this goes on, are realizing that. And so, yeah, I think, you know, we're not in a time crunch at all right now, I don't believe. But, you know, I'm not sure we have the best upper hand, but I don't think we have any reason to panic or to do something that is not in our best interests.
Peter, do you think the government needs to be more transparent about where things are at? Because, I mean, Jamieson Greer actually tabled what the United States wants to get out of us with Congress at the end of last year, right? He says he wants us to lift the liquor boycott. He wants better market access for American dairy. They're going after the Online Streaming Act, which brought some of the tech giants under Canadian broadcasting rules. We don't really know what Canada's position is, frankly, other than we don't want tariffs and we just want to keep the deal as it is. They haven't said much publicly. Dominic LeBlanc has a knack for saying a lot without saying very much at all when he's speaking publicly. Do you think that at some point Ottawa needs to be a little more forthcoming about what's underway here?
Well, I'm tempted to say, JP, that the Canadian government has to be a little more transparent about a number of things, including strikes that endanger Canadian lives. And I think, you know, coming back to Michelle's point about the affordability crisis in the United States, we have one here too. And so I think we got to be careful about thinking that we're going to be in a, you know, an upper hand position anytime soon, because these are issues that bite in Canada too, including at the pumps and including at the grocery store. But I do sense that this negotiation is really now just starting to kick off. And one of the harbingers will be if, in fact, the United States does try to leverage us on things like supply management and some of the other issues that they have to, you know, put forward as things that they want to see addressed. I come back to Andrew's point, though, or Rob's, that I think we are going to see the ultimate outcome of all of this, at least that's our hope, clearly, is an agreement that doesn't look much different than the last time. Yeah. With the president declaring a win, because his idea of a win-win is 2 wins for him. And, you know, it'll probably be described in those soaring terms as we saw the last time as the greatest trade agreement that's ever existed, even though, you know, this agreement predates him by several decades. But nevertheless, there is no getting away from the reality that this is by far the biggest issue that is going to face the Canadian government between now and whenever that next election is. The resolution of this trade dispute is what Mark Carney was elected to do. He said he would get this deal done, and that runway is getting shorter. There's no question.
I can see Pierre Poilievre there. He's just walking into the room, shaking some hands with some folks there in New York City. So we'll just keep an eye on that. We'll bring you that live when it happens. Andrew, your thoughts?
You know, we've also got some things that we can bring to the table that help sweeten the deal for the Americans, thinking of this affordability crisis. I mean, there has been announcements already about the ability to increase the amount of oil flowing into the United States. Certainly, if we look at what's happening on the fertilizer front, the fact that Canadian potash remains relatively affordable and stable as a product compared to the problems that they're running into right now with urea prices coming out of the Gulf, where we're seeing American farmers really facing a huge shock. It's making a really tremendous impact on their corn and soya production decisions right now. All of those issues are things where Canada, again, has an opportunity to step forward and say, look, we're a reliable partner. Let's figure out how we make this a more reliable and trustworthy partnership. It's a tougher sell in some ways on this side of the border because there is not a high degree of trust about the Americans right now, especially under Trump. And so I think that this is one of the challenges that the Prime Minister has, is how to, demonstrate that Canadians are, willing to move forward without looking like we're further integrating into an economy with a set of partners that we just can't trust. And that's a piece that really does take a little bit of time to work itself out. It is quite possible, as Rob says, that with the midterms coming, that maybe that starts to, obviously this will need to get resolved before that, but maybe this starts to bring that temperature down in a way that works for the interest of getting a deal.
Rob, what I was struck by with Poilievre's messaging this week on the United States is to what Andrew just said. Like, he is kind of saying, actually, we should not just give away this relationship. He's kind of saying we need to kind of lean in. Let's revive the auto pact. Hey, let's sell vehicles back and forth over the Canada-U.S. border. Let's talk about how we can make America rich with our aluminum and steel. Like, the Liberal government's kind of gone off that messaging, right, as they push for trade diversification, as they lean into India and China and Australia and the Nordic, and they're trying to kind of show that they are taking a step back from the United States. Poilievre's strategy is like, no, yeah, things aren't great right now, but let's at least try and revive how things were, because really, we can't beat that deal we have with the U.S. I was really noticing that sort of tonal shift.